I'm Elias. I spent months saving for that diamond ring. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise. I gave it to my wife on our anniversary, but what she did next shattered more than my trust. She handed it to another man, and when karma finally came for her, it was wearing a badge. Before I share how betrayal turned into the sweetest revenge, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this story is a storm you won't forget. I still remember that night, like it's carved into the walls of my memory. It was our 5th anniversary, and for weeks I'd been walking around with a secret burning a hole in my pocket, literally and figuratively. I'd saved for months quietly, cutting corners on everything I could. No new shoes, no weekend trips, no indulgences. Every rupee I tucked away had a name, a purpose, a sparkle. That purpose was a ring. Not just any ring. A diamond ring that carried every promise I thought our marriage stood for. I'd imagined the look on Leora's face 1,000 times before that night. In my head, her eyes widened. Her lips parted in surprise, and that soft laugh, the one she had only for me, would fill the room. I'd imagined the way she'd throw her arms around me like she did in the early years, when love didn't need translating. Back then, everything between us felt easy, natural, real. I set the table myself. Nothing fancy, just candles, warm light, and her favorite pasta that I'd somehow managed not to burn this time. I wore the watch she gave me on our 1st anniversary. She came home late, said she got caught up at work. But the moment she saw the table, her face softened. For a second, I swear I saw the woman I married, the one who used to look at me like I was her whole world. That glimpse was enough to silence every little doubt I'd been trying not to hear lately. When I knelt down and opened that little velvet box, her eyes did light up. I'll give her that. She gasped, covered her mouth, and said my name like it actually meant something. I felt my chest swell. All those nights of saving, all the quiet sacrifices, they felt worth it. She kissed me, said she loved me, and slid the ring on her finger like it belonged there. And in that exact moment, I believed her. I believed in us. I believed that what I was giving her wasn't just a diamond, but a lifetime. If only I'd known. That wasn't the night we started a new chapter. It was the night I unknowingly handed my heart to someone who had already decided to give it away. The first crack didn't come with shouting or accusations. It came quietly, almost too quietly to notice, but I felt it, like a chill that creeps into the room before a storm. A week after our anniversary, Leora started changing in ways I couldn't explain. She used to be the one who'd text me all day, sending little things like a photo of her lunch or a joke that only made sense to the two of us. Now hours would pass without a word. I told myself she was just busy. Everyone gets busy, right? But busy doesn't explain the way she started taking her phone into the bathroom. Busy doesn't explain the way she turned the screen away when I walked into the room. It wasn't just the phone. It was the distance, the kind that doesn't show up in steps but in silence. She used to rest her head on my shoulder when we watched TV. Now she sat at the other end of the couch, scrolling endlessly. She used to tell me about her day, every small annoyance and every big victory. Now when I asked, all I got was, it was fine. At night, she started coming home later and later. At first, it was work meetings, then late deadlines, and then no explanation at all. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd sigh, like my concern was a weight she didn't want to carry. I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage, like I was knocking on a door that used to be mine, but was now locked from the inside. I remember one night in particular. She came home past midnight, smelling like a perfume that wasn't hers. I don't know how I noticed, but I did. I lay there pretending to sleep as she slipped into bed beside me, her body stiff, like we were two people lying on opposite sides of a war no one wanted to name. But here's the thing about love. It makes you blind in the kindest and cruelest ways. I told myself not to assume, not to be paranoid. I wanted to believe the best of her, even when everything was whispering the worst. The cracks were there, clear as day. I just didn't want to see the wall breaking. Not yet. It happened on a Friday. Funny how the biggest moments in life never announce themselves. They just slip into your day like they belong there, and before you realize it, everything has changed. I had this idea that surprising Leora at work might bring us closer again. I'd convinced myself that maybe all she needed was a reminder of what we had. So I left work early, stopped by a small bakery she loved, and picked up that chocolate mousse cake she always called a piece of heaven. My heart was beating too fast for something so small. Maybe that should have been my first sign. When your gut is louder than your hope, it's trying to tell you something. Her office wasn't far. I parked across the street, cake box in hand, ready to walk in. But then, I saw her. She wasn't alone. Leora was standing on the sidewalk, laughing. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard in weeks, not the tired chuckles she gave me at dinner. This was real, carefree, like the world didn't exist beyond that moment. And standing in front of her was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, confident, leaning a little too close. She wasn't pulling away. I froze. My feet stayed planted on the pavement, but my chest, it felt like someone was wringing it from the inside. Then I saw it. The thing that snapped everything I'd been trying so hard not to admit. The ring, the diamond ring I gave her. It was hanging from a thin silver chain around his neck. I stared at it, my mind screaming at me to find another explanation. Maybe she let him hold it for some reason. Maybe. No, I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind anymore. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was my promise, my trust, my love. And there it was, worn like a trophy by someone who didn't even know my name. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't march over like the movies teach you to. I just stood there, gripping that cake box so tightly the cardboard bent beneath my fingers. I thought heartbreak was loud. Turns out, it's silent. It doesn't roar. It sinks. And in that moment, I sank with it. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow tick of the clock like it was mocking me. I kept replaying the image in my head. Leora's. Laughter. That man's hand brushing hers, and the ring. My ring, resting against his chest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was insult wrapped in silence. By the time she walked through the door the next evening, I had made up my mind. No rehearsed speeches, no calm conversations. I needed the truth, even if it ripped me open. She came, in casually, dropped her purse on the counter like nothing was burning between us. I stood there in the kitchen, leaning against the table, hands clenched so hard my knuckles ached. "Where were you last night?" I asked. She froze, just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. That hesitation, that tiny flicker of fear. "Work," she said, smooth as silk. "Try again." Her eyes narrowed, annoyed, not guilty. Annoyed. "Elias, not this again. I told you I've been swamped." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The photo of her and that man glowed on the screen, bright and undeniable. "Swamped?" I said, my voice low and steady. "Swamped with him." Something in her face cracked then, not fully, but enough. She stepped forward, hands shaking slightly. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is," I shot back. "Why is the ring I gave you around his neck?" Silence. It stretched so wide I could hear my own heartbeat. She finally looked up at me, and the softness I once loved was gone. "Because I love him," she said. Just like that. Flat. Cold. Like those words didn't just slice through everything we'd built. "He makes me feel alive, Elias. You've become predictable, comfortable, boring." The world tilted. I felt my chest tighten, a heat crawling up my throat. Then, "Why did you keep lying?" She stepped closer, eyes sharp now, not sorry. "Because I didn't want to deal with your drama." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because pain has a way of twisting everything. She slapped me then, hard. The sound cracked through the room like lightning. I didn't hit back. I didn't need to. I just looked at her, really looked at her. And something inside me went quiet. That slap didn't break me. It built something colder. Something she wasn't ready for. After that night, something inside me shifted. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't chase. I just went quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from weakness, but from a storm building behind calm eyes. Leora thought that slap was the end of it, that she had won whatever twisted game she was playing. But she didn't realize. She'd just woken up a part of me she'd never met before. The days that followed were strangely peaceful on the surface. She moved through the house like nothing happened, humming while she made coffee, scrolling through her phone, smiling to herself like she had some secret she didn't think I could touch. She believed my silence meant surrender, but it wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I started watching, listening, not as a husband anymore, but as someone gathering the truth, piece by piece. I paid attention to her schedule, every late night, every vague explanation. I started making copies of receipts, saving, screenshots, forwarding her messages she thought she'd deleted. I learned the rhythm of her lies so well I could predict them before they came out of her mouth. I even found his name, Ronan, the man with my ring around his neck. A few careful searches, a few calls to people who owed me favors. And suddenly, the image of a charming stranger began to unravel. Turns out Ronan had a history, a very dark one. Fraud, scams, a reputation for using women and leaving chaos behind. He wasn't some great love story. He was a con artist in expensive cologne, and Leora had no idea. I didn't confront her this time. Not yet. I wanted something bigger than an argument. I wanted the truth to eat its way out on its own. So I reached out to someone who'd once been more than a friend, Detective Mara. Sharp, relentless, the kind of person who never forgot a face or a favor. When I told her everything, she didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly and said, "Leave it to me." I walked out of that meeting with a strange calm. I wasn't the broken man standing in that kitchen anymore. I was something colder, sharper. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. This was about watching karma lace up its boots. It started with a single phone call. Detective Mara's voice on the other end was calm, but there was an edge to it, the kind that told me something big was coming. "Elias," she said, "your guy Ronan isn't just another liar. He's a walking case file, and that ring? It's about to do a lot more than shine." She explained everything. Ronan had been on their radar for a while. Scams, fraud, stolen jewelry. Women fell for his charm, and he stripped them of everything they owned. He wasn't in love with Leora. He was using her, just like he'd used others. And the ring I bought with every ounce of love I had? It was evidence now. Evidence that could end his little game. When I hung up, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel rage. I felt something steadier, like standing on the edge of a storm you know is about to break exactly the way you need it to. That night, I changed my role. No more broken husband. No more desperate man trying to understand why. I played along. I smiled when she smiled. I asked about her late nights, with just enough warmth to keep her guard down, and she bought it. She actually thought I'd accepted it, that I'd grown numb to her betrayal. She had no idea I was standing right behind the curtain, watching every move. Meanwhile, Mara and her team were setting the trap. They tracked Ronan's patterns, his meetings, his favorite bars, the people he'd conned. The diamond ring. My ring became the thread they pulled, unraveling everything he'd wrapped himself in. The irony wasn't lost on me. The thing I gave in love was going to be the thing that brought him down. The night before it all went down, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. My hands were steady, my jaw was set. It was a strange kind of power. Not the loud, vengeful kind, but the quiet certainty of knowing the tide had already turned. I didn't have to expose them. Karma was already on its way, and this time it was wearing a badge. The night of the fall felt almost too calm. Leora was glowing, not the way she used to when she was truly happy, but the kind of glow someone wears when they believe they've fooled the world. She'd dressed up like she was walking into a fairy tale, not realizing the ending had already been written. She had invited me to a small dinner party at one of Ronan's favorite spots. She said it was to start fresh, to show we could still be civil. I didn't argue. I just nodded, pretending to be the man still trying to hold on to the pieces she'd shattered. Inside, I was already counting the seconds. When we arrived, Ronan was there, charming as ever, wearing my ring like a medal he hadn't earned. He shook my hand with that smug smile, like he was the winner in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, because he had no idea what was about to walk through that door. We sat down. Fake smiles. Small talk. Leora touching his arm like I didn't exist. My pulse was steady. Steady in a way it hadn't been for weeks. Then it happened. A soft knock. A voice at the entrance. And then 2 plainclothes officers stepped in, followed by Detective Mara. Their presence sucked the air out of the room. Leora's smile froze mid-laugh. Ronan stiffened but tried to act casual. Mara didn't say much. She didn't have to. "Ronan Carter," she said clearly. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and theft." Everything that followed moved in slow motion. Ronan tried to run, but the officers moved faster. Leora shouted his name, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. The restaurant fell silent as everyone watched the man she'd chosen over me get handcuffed right in front of her. And the ring, the diamond ring, glinted under the lights as they pulled it from his neck and dropped it into an evidence bag. She turned to me then, tears spilling, disbelief written all over her face. But I just stood there, calm, solid, silent. I didn't have to raise my voice. Karma had spoken louder than I ever could. I've always believed silence has a way of saying the things words can't. That night, when Ronan was dragged out in handcuffs and the door shut behind the officers, the silence in that restaurant wasn't just heavy. It was deafening. Leora stood there like the ground beneath her had cracked open. Her perfect image, the little world she'd built around her lies, collapsed in one brutal instant. Her hands were still shaking, her lipstick smeared, and her eyes were the eyes of someone realizing they'd bet everything on the wrong hand. I didn't rush to her. I didn't hold her. I just stood where I was, watching the pieces of her fantasy scatter around her feet. She whispered my name, Elias, like it was a lifeline. But the thing she didn't understand was, she'd cut that line a long time ago. Outside, cameras flashed. Ronan wasn't just arrested. He was exposed. His name was already being whispered in the air. Con man, fraud, thief. The same mouth that had smiled at her hours ago was now swearing at the officers as they pushed him into a car. She turned to me, tears streaking down her face, and whispered, "I didn't know. I swear, Elias, I didn't know." Maybe she didn't, but she'd known enough to betray me. And that was enough for me. I looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time in months, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger who had burned a home to keep someone else warm. A week later, the papers were signed. No screaming, no courtroom drama, just ink on paper and a quiet goodbye that should have happened long ago. She left with nothing. Ronan had taken more from her than she'd ever imagined. Money, trust, reputation. Karma didn't just knock on her door. It walked right in and rearranged everything. When I got the ring back from evidence, it didn't shine the way it used to. But I didn't throw it away. I kept it locked in a drawer, not as a symbol of love, but as a reminder that even the most beautiful promises can end up around the wrong neck. And just like that, the silence stopped hurting. It finally felt like peace. The night air wrapped around me like a quiet promise. I stood on my balcony, hands resting on the cold railing as the city below pulsed with light. My name is Elias, and tonight wasn't about sorrow anymore. It was about rebirth. A quiet kind of power I built from every piece they tried to break. I remember how it all ended. The lies, the whispers, the humiliation. There was a time when their betrayal echoed louder than my own heartbeat. I remember standing there at the divorce celebration, stripped of love, dignity, and trust. I thought that was the end of me, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of someone I never knew I could become. Every bruise on my heart turned into a lesson. Every sleepless night forged something solid inside me. I stopped questioning why it happened to me. Instead, I started whispering to myself, just watch me. Watch me rise from the ashes they left. Watch me rebuild my life with hands they thought would always tremble. As I stare at the glass door's reflection, I see a man who no longer bends beneath the weight of what broke him. I see Elias, not the man who begged to be loved, but the man who learned to love himself enough to walk away. The pain no longer defines me. It shaped me into something stronger, something real. Karma moved like a silent storm, no loud warnings. No grand spectacle. Just quiet, poetic justice. The ones who laughed at my pain are now living their own lessons, one bitter taste at a time. And me? I smile. Not because everything is perfect, but because I've learned that peace isn't given. It's claimed. I close my eyes, feeling the wind slide across my skin. This isn't the end of my story. It's the chapter where I take the pen back. I whisper softly to the night, "This is mine now, not hers. Not theirs, mine. For the first time in a long, long time. I'm proud of the man in the mirror. The man they couldn't break. The man who became his own strength.